All right. Folks, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, which is part of RENCI's Accelerating Collaborative Team Science webinar series. I'm Amanda Miller, and I work at RENCI as the Associate Director for the National Consortium for Data Science, or NCDS. NCDS provides upskilling and community building opportunities for people exploring topics in data science. And I am thrilled to moderate today's panel of distinguished experts. But before we begin with introductions and that sort of thing, let's just take a quick minute to review our agenda, and we'll take a moment to introduce our speakers and hear more about their work. And then we're going to spend some time learning alongside the panel. And then we'll kind of jump into some conversations that are prompted from by you guys using our Q&A board, which is called Easy Retro. So in terms of our housekeeping items today, we have disabled the Zoom Q&A for attendees, and all questions related to the panel should be uploaded to Easy Retro, which is our crowdsourcing Q&A platform, which we are going to be sharing in the Zoom chat now. And you may find the platform intuitive, easy to use, and if so, we do welcome you to add questions and comments to that board throughout the panel discussion. But a friendly note that we will be asking you to hold on to those questions until after our moderated discussion has ended. We will share instructions and the link to the board once again after the moderated discussion has ended. So with that in mind, let's take a quick look at how we define team science. So we use this definition from the National Cancer Institute. Team science is a collaborative effort to address a scientific challenge that leverages the strength and expertise of professionals, oftentimes trained in different fields. Although traditional single investigator-driven approaches are ideal for many scientific endeavors, coordinated teams of investigators with diverse skills and knowledge may be especially helpful for tackling complex scientific and societal problems. So without any further delay, and with that sort of baseline understanding in mind, let's meet our guests. I would love to walk through the next slide and hear a little bit from each one of you. If we could start off with Haley Brighton, share your name, your title, your employer, maybe 2 or 3 sentences that describe your work, and then tell us what your superhero power is regarding your work in the science of team science, or how you function as a team science expert. So I'm going to ask Haley to get started, and then we'll move to Lakaya.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm Haley Brighton. I'm the Associate Director of Grants and Programs at the Institute for Convergent Science at UNC. We're now under Innovate Carolina. And what we try to do is help to build out the early stage pipeline of innovative technologies coming out on campus that can bridge the gap between different departments and schools on campus. And we help them move from basic discovery to translatable opportunities. And my superhero power, let's see, the way Amanda phrased this is before, what would people say you're pretty good at? And I would say I'm pretty decent at making connections. So if you have an idea or need someone with specific expertise or want to talk to somebody in specific knowledge of IP, et cetera, yeah, come to me and I can try to connect with you with whoever is the appropriate person.
Fantastic. Lakaya?
All right. Good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. My name's Lakaya Johnson. I use she, her pronouns. I have the privilege of serving as a principal research scientist at Sage Bionetworks. And what I do as a principal scientist is really support large big team science projects, really, which are these multi site initiatives that are funded by a lot of different agencies. And what we really do is attempt to implement our best and promising practices for strengthening scientific community, for broadening participation in whatever disease state or issue that the team is interested in addressing. But really, we pay special attention to the environments in which science is produced, to hopefully sustain or generate some sustained collaborations. In terms of my superhero power as a team scientist, I would say it's definitely my optimism. That's the first thing. Where we find a lot of challenges and where we have conversations about how difficult team science is, I see it as opportunities to really build relationships, and think about ways that we can leverage our collective brilliance and intelligence to find solutions that will hopefully allow us to advance population outcomes more broadly. And secondly, I would say I'm a health equity scientist through and through. And so I love the literature. I love getting to identify different ways of addressing challenges that have been illuminated from a lot of different disciplines over the past, I don't know, 100 years or so. And so if you talk to me, I probably have an article that I will share with you about the topic from some, seemingly unrelated discipline. But ultimately, I do believe that that's where our innovation is going to continue to come from is synthesis. And so I'm super excited to be in communication and in conversation with you all today. Thanks.
Thank you. Guy,
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever everyone is calling from. My name is Guy Lotreciano. I'm an associate professor at the School of Medicine and Health Sciences at George Washington University. Um, my areas of work and my own scholarship dance around motivation and team science readiness, and what motivates or demotivates individuals to participate in team science or interactions. I've done a a good amount of work in the past several years in developing competency for translational science and knowledge producing teams. And I also have a background in complexity science and cross-disciplinarity, where I use the principles of complexity science to try to understand what are the barriers, both structurally and also individually, that keep people from being able to work effectively in teams. I just got this question about what my superhero power was 15 minutes ago, because I didn't know I'd have to report on that. And one of the persons that is on this panel with me said, Guy, I think you're really good at mentoring. And when I think about it, it is really something I take very seriously. And I mentor doctoral students, also young professionals and young scholars, but then also I try my best to be available to help people move the needle on our profession and careers in our profession. So I guess that's my superpower. Thank you.
thank you so much. I know that it is always a difficult request to kind of sing your own praises, but you guys did an amazing job, and I really appreciate your honesty and your vulnerability. It's great to learn about this aspect of you. So thank you. Um, and panelists, we're going to go ahead and get started today with a very friendly reminder that, according to the title of today's webinar, the three of you are here to explain it all. So, no pressure or anything, and I'm completely confident that we can do this together in the next 40 minutes. Um, our team science working group here at RENCI has hosted some wonderful webinar speakers over the last 6 months, but we always seem to have more questions than minutes in the hour. And we've collected this great bank of questions that have yet to be answered from our webinars. And so for our final webinar of 2024, we thought it would be interesting to bring together a few experts working in very different facets of team science to learn more about their perspectives on this field and in the field of the science of team science. So we've selected a handful of seed questions from our webinar bank, and we're going to use those as a starting point to explore our panelists' varying points of view. So just a friendly reminder to panelists, I'm going to be asking a seed question to a specific person, but I am encouraging you to chime in and share your perspective as well. Everybody ready? All right. Okay, great. Let's get started with Haley, just going in alpha order by last name. Haley, do you see a distinction between team science and convergent science? And then the second part of that is, how does open science play any role in this conversation and question?
Yeah, good question. So to me, team science speaks more to similar disciplines or the same discipline working together across topics, um, or with specific expertise to solve issues relevant to a singular field of study. Say, for example, building a protein library. You have one person in the lab performing bioinformatics and another on the bench doing the actual cloning. So they're doing separate tasks within the same discipline to achieve a goal specific to their field. Now, convergent science, again, to me, my opinion, is bridging two or more disciplines to create major advances in science and technology. So it's more cross-disciplinary collaboration and cross-topic integration. So the goal of convergent science is to translate and apply new discoveries and innovative strategies to solve these complex problems or societal needs. And using the same example above, so take the protein library, collaborate with, say, a cancer biologist to identify a disease target, and then bring in a clinician who can translate these discoveries, and then perhaps include an industry expert who can provide input throughout the development of this program. And now you have convergence. And then for both, I think open science is critical to basic research for facilitating new discoveries. And moving from open science to protected IP can kind of feel like a controversial topic within academia, but it's really complex. And, for us, our goal is really to have the broadest impact possible. Yeah, I mean, we can go on and on about this subject, so.
Really helpful. Anything to add?
I would say that something that is sometimes underemphasized in the core elements of convergence research, the way it's been developed and disseminated, is that it really gives us the opportunity to rethink the definition of scientific teams to include stakeholders that may not be your typical candidates for doing research. So, because I work in health and medicine, and many on this call do as well, clearly we are moving towards much more patient and guardian involvement in some of the problems that we're trying to solve. We're putting more emphasis on real world evidence and lived experience, especially in some areas like developmental disabilities and rare diseases. So I think the concept of convergence research has sort of a meta effect on how we even define team science now. It's not always going to be groups of scientists, but rather groups of stakeholders. And let me just give you an example. Once upon a time, I was invited to review for the engineering directorate at NSF, and the topic of the grant application was coastal waterways. I know nothing about coastal waterways other than I live across from a river. And I couldn't figure out why they were asking me to review. And then I realized it's because NSF has embraced convergence research so greatly that collaborative plans that also educate workforces and are inclusive of stakeholders and those who may be affected by these wicked problems is redefining the way that we consider doing team science and what team scientists are.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think that I love the inclusion of the term open science in this question because I really think about the term impact. And so, as we think about the fact that team science is supposed to generate or accelerate our path towards scientific discovery that can impact, again, human health or population health more broadly, open science ensures that people get to benefit equitably from the uptake of these benefits. And so it's really exciting to see, again, the inclusion of conversations related to open science scholarship and education that needs to take place to ensure that we can shift perspectives and kind of get people more oriented to the fact that we really do care about ensuring that we are kind of completing this translational pathway from population impact to industry level impact and then ultimately population level benefit again. So I think about the connection to open science as being an opportunity to be intentional about the pathways to public benefit from the products of these team science and convergent science activities.
Really great, guys. Thank you. So Lakaya, I'm going to actually bounce to you now. What teaming and data considerations should investigators consider during proposal development? So just sort of in terms of like, crucial conversations for teams who are in proposal development stages and that sort of thing. I know this might feel a little disjointed, folks, from the audience, but hopefully we're going to get into a little rhythm where we're kind of expecting some good questions that we've been ignoring for the last year, but we're excited to have you guys dig into.
No, Amanda, I absolutely love that question because the proposal development phase does represent a really great opportunity to have some of the crucial conversations related to the longevity and sustainability of the team that you're hopefully bringing together, not just for this one proposal, but to think about how this team can continue to work together long term to have some scientific success. So I think that this is a really great time. I love the initiatives that I've seen across the country specifically that look at seeding collaborations that are in the proposal development stage. Because ultimately, again, what we really want to do is orient investigators to thinking more intentionally about collaboration, not just being a response to a requirement and a proposal, but to a pathway to, shoring up your own independent, and I'm going to talk more about that later, but your own career as an independent investigator. And I say that because the best way to be an independent investigator is to be an interdependent investigator. And so as we think about longevity and what that means for scientific teams in the proposal stage, it's really important to utilize tried and true best and promising practices related to collaboration planning. So if we think about expertise, who is on your team? Do you have people with complementary skill sets that will allow you to actually think about the problem more holistically or about the research opportunity? And again, that's thinking not specifically to responding to the question of that proposal, but responding to what your research team or the multitude of research questions that this newly formed team could potentially respond to. In doing so, it's important to also think about roles and responsibilities. And we have these conversations often because we know that a lack of role clarity can really lead to a lack of harmony within team environments as well. And so being really clear about why we're working together, what everyone's role is, and whether or not we have enough diversity in the composition of our team. And so if we have investigators that have very clear strengths and disciplinary areas, are we paying attention to other dimensions of diversity and the complexity that those dimensions add to our team? And are we making plans to address those? And again, addressing them not just in the proposal and your multi-PI plan, but also thinking about real-time, day-to-day conversations and how that will impact the team's success long-term. Guy mentioned one of my favorite topics, it's mentorship. So another area or type of diversity on your team might be career stage diversity. And so thinking about what support might be needed for different team members that might be at different stages of their career, that might be at different stages of engagement in collaborative research activities in general. But ultimately, the goal is to ensure that you're able to pull together a team that minimizes, conflicts of interest and also can think more longitudinally about opportunities for long-term impact and success. I really do want to respond also to the portion of the question that asked about data considerations. And it is so important that we are being intentional in preparing for proposals that require investigators to include data management plans or data sharing plans as a part of the proposal. And so there are so many really great resources and tools. I know that you all had a great session about like using generative AI as a member of the research team. But a tool that I've seen used really, really effectively is a free open source tool called the DMP. So if you Google like DMP tool, you'll be able to see that this is a free, like community supported service that really does help investigators and their teams walk through questions that they need to be aware of as they are developing their data management plans. And so again, I don't think it's ever too early to start thinking about, again, intentional aspects of the team's composition, but really thinking about it with a longer time horizon or arc so that you're not coming together for a specific proposal, but that you're coming together with the intention of applying for or submitting multiple proposals based on the conversations that you all are having at the inception or at the
Really
nascent
about
stage.
starting relationships and stewarding relationships instead of just having a one hit, like, let's just use each other for this one experience, right? But really to kind of steward those relationships and connections into other areas. I think that's really, really smart. Um, Guy or Haley, do you have anything to add to that?
I I just want to say when you have to ask yourself the question, is a proposal a reason to bring a group or a team together, or is a proposal the result of a history of teamwork that has been occurring within a group of people? It's a challenge for young scholars to weigh out how much time they should be spending in team endeavors versus their own individual pathways towards their own specialty scholarship, right? However, the case I try and make when I am working with young scholars or doctoral students is that it's a rarity anymore that we see in science a single author paper. And we all know that. We've basically revolutionized the idea of how publishing gets done. And, you know, groups or teams that publish together lend a greater credibility. But that doesn't come from applying for a proposal cold without ever working with the people that you are planning to work with through funding. It comes from a history of being either the type of person who people gravitate towards to work with, or the type of person who has worked regularly in teams. So when it comes to the data considerations, it's important to show a track record that and there's a lot of different types of grants. I mean, I don't know what anyone's thinking of an R01 or a training grant or a U grant or whatever the case may be. But if you are applying for a proposal, part of the data is your track record as a team scientist, a person who's worked with others, either during your developmental education, master's, doctoral, or even in your early career, even though that at times is in tension with the requirements necessary to advance at your university. But even those are changing, not as quickly as I would like to see them changing, but they are changing.
think that's helpful, and it's also kind of a good segue to the next question we have that is for you, Guy. And folks, I'm going to start adding these questions to the chat so people can kind of stay on track and know which question we're answering. Um, Guy, do you have advice for leaders when they have groups that are struggling to find a common, compelling purpose? And I think that kind of dovetails into what we were just talking about a little bit. But again, of course, I would love to hear from all of you on this. But Guy, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. It's a provocative question because what's a compelling purpose? That could be the aims of your grant. You have a responsibility to meet the outcomes of what you said you were going to do. Is it more a general understanding of what do we as a team play play in the bigger picture, like either through our specialty or that sort of thing. But I prepared for this question with some very basic information I just want to share with you that I think is something that we often forget about when I hope you can see, I'll go to slide mode. So, well, this is fine. The difference between task work and teamwork. There is a difference. Task work are the things that need to get done that are associated with whatever project you're working on. It could be biological, it could be policy, it could be anything in between. Certain things need to get done. And teamwork, which is not totally wrapped up in the task at hand. So this is something I'm not sure how many people have been, introduced to, but it really sets a stage for how we look at the purpose of our teaming engagement together. So task work refers to what needs to be done, as I said. And these are the tasks of the team. So if you remember Dory, she just says, just keep swimming, keep swimming, keep swimming. And I think sometimes that's how our teams work. Just keep working, keep working, keep working. And that would lead us to believe that we're making progress if we just keep working on the parts that we need to. But then there's another aspect of it, which is teamwork, which is the attitudes, behaviors, and cognitive factors required to be a high functioning team. We sometimes call these the ABCs of teams. And if you look at my little um, picture here, I hope this reference is meaningful to everyone in the room. I often have to check myself if these are too old, but these are three of the Sex and the City stars that we know and probably have enjoyed over time. And then we have our friend Bernie Sanders over here. And clearly the three gals are are in tune. They're involved, they're engaged. You don't even need an explanation of this picture. And Bernie here, if you recall, this was at an inauguration. This is how he chose to dress at the inauguration. Shows a very different sort of stance. So what are we really talking about from a science level? So the attitudes, your teamwork has to understand what are the attitudes that are necessary to go in to the work we do with a purpose. And I find the best way to do this is not just to trust that your teammates, your other people in the team, are trusting, but that they're open. It's a safe environment. These are attitudes that we can work on that have nothing to do with pipetting or analyzing data. It has to do with building that purpose in a team. The behavioral, these are important things. The skills supporting interaction with teammates, how we communicate, how we share knowledge, how we decide to interact with each other. These are the behaviors. Some of the work I'm doing right now, and one of my co-authors is on the call with me, is how do we even observe what the attitudes, behaviors, and cognitive factors are? We can't just look at someone and say, oh, they think this way because they act this way. It gets more complicated than that. And then cognitive is, of course, the knowledge associating with teammates, not just the scientific knowledge, but whose role is whose? What are the responsibilities? Who holds the knowledge, bucket where someone else holds the knowledge thimble in that same area? If you're interested in this, and unfortunately this is not open access, but you could look at Bell, Brown, and Culinary and Outland's paper on this, the ABCs of teamwork, American psychologists.
Thank you for that. Amazing, unexpected, love it anyway, PowerPoint. Just so the other panelists know, that was not an expectation. We are thrilled that Guy put that together, though. But I do want to call on Lakaya to add on to what you were just saying. I do think she might have some valuable, addition to your points.
Yeah, so I think that the ABCs of cognition are really important, or the ABCs of teaming are really important, especially as we start to think about the fact that they do influence how opportunity is structured on teams. And so we really do need to be intentional about having really clear conversations if you are a leader that has a group. And I think that the use of the term group and not team was really intentional there. But if there is no common purpose, I think that's because there probably isn't a common purpose. If everyone has not taken the time to really understand what their own personal motivations are, and if this collaboration is not going to get you closer to your destination, then it's an opportunity to really revisit whether or not this is a collaboration that you should engage in. I think that people often think that we want people to collaborate with everyone. That's team science, and that's not team science. That can actually cause a lot of harm, both on an interpersonal and scientific, or from an interpersonal and scientific perspective. And so I think it is really important to think really intentionally about the fact if you are struggling to find a common mission or a common vision for a team that has come together with or a group that has come together with an explicit purpose, then maybe it's time to reevaluate or revisit whether or not that team or that group is the right group to move forward with that process.
Really helpful. Haley, anything to add there?
No, not specifically.
No worries.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually I have a different direction to kind of take us with my next question for you. Thank you, Lakaya and Guy. That was really helpful. And I very much appreciate your perspectives on that. Haley, taking us back to kind of 101 and basics, can you share with us your perspective on best practices when, creating those lanes that Lakaya talked about, right? Like when you're setting roles and responsibilities for successful teams, like top 3 things you need to make sure you do in every single, setting like that.
Yeah, it's a little bit, so that question is very broad. And within ICS, we actually have an existing framework that makes that a lot easier for us. So with our internally funded programs, we have teams that are already in existence that are working together. And then we fund the further development and hopefully technological translation of that up into a point. So with that, we actually hire a postdoc typically to run and perform the actual hard science needed for the team, where the faculty basically act as advisors. And so it's less of defining specifically what their responsibilities are, because the roles are kind of just embedded within the framework already. But what becomes critical is to add on those touch points, both at one-on-one level, small group setting and then full group setting, regular touch points, because identifying those go, no go points and needing the team to be flexible enough to pivot where and when necessary are critical to the milestones that we help them set. So it's really both technological milestones and innovation-oriented milestones are developed with these teams in conjunction, depending on whatever the project is. I mean, it's very unique and kind of, I guess, specialized in a way. So it's less like, here's what you're going to do, because what we're going to do is we're going to hire a postdoc for you. And they're going to do the work here. And then what you're going to do is help advise them. And while we also give them some entrepreneurial knowledge and, help them with market research or whatever it is that they're needing to do. It just becomes like a major collaborative effort focused around that one person doing the work.
Mhm.
Anything to add, Guy or Lakaya?
Yeah,
I guess sorry, I forgot I had the, but then there's another approach where you do have to build a team from the ground up, depending on, identifying a societal need or emerging technology. And so from there, I think the key important factor is to identify that leader and to empower that leader and give them the tools and everything that they need, whether it's admin support, space, resources, innovation framework. So yeah, that's another thing that we can do is, but I really think without the leader that is known in that team, it's going to be very challenging for everyone else to understand, okay, here's what we're going to do.
Mhm.
How do you manage multiple leaders?
So it depends. So I don't know, at least in my experience, typically there's one main leader, right? But then for our internal funded programs, the postdoc in some sense is the leader doing the work, but then you have the faculty who are bringing their intellectual expertise to that project. So that becomes kind of but yeah, that can get a little tricky, knowing like if two faculty have or three faculty have an idea for what to do with the project, what is the postdoc actually going to do? And then you kind of have to go back to what your goals are and what the milestones are. And then what is the project or the specific experiment that needs to happen to get to that go, no go point faster. And then another thing is we can do bring in an industry expert that might have another kind of input that might be important for the development of that further development of that technology or discovery.
Yeah, I would add, I think it's really important. Something that Haley mentioned quite a few times was the goal. What's the goal? What's the goal? What's the goal? Can we be intentional about why we're coming together, specifically at this point in time? And I say this point in time because we should definitely look at teams utilizing a growth or maturity matrix. And people are going to come in and out of the team as the project progresses. And so it's really important that you have the right people at the right time. In implementation science, we talk about just-in-time interventions. And so I think it's really having the ability to take a systems kind of look or perspective when looking at the project overall or the life cycle of that specific project. If it's one that's going to take place over a specific period of time, and then ensure that you have the right people in place to deliver the deliverables or the products that are needed at that time. And so I would say it's really going to require you to zoom out quite a bit and be intentional about bringing in the right people at the right time. And then thinking about ways to manage, again, the team and task work differentiation that Guy distinguished earlier as well.
Yeah, I just have two brief points. One, well, maybe three. One is there are many different types of teams. Some are, deeply connected, or what we would say is strongly tied, and others are more loosely tied. And secondly, um, if you've studied one team, you've studied one team. It's very hard to study one team and say, or even 10 teams and say, this is how all teams should work. It's just not that simplistic. And I think also too, it's important to understand in the scholarship of, or the science of team science, we also tend to look through different lenses. We could look through the lens of management, we can look through the lens of leadership, et cetera, anthropology, et cetera, et cetera. I, as a social scientist, have a lens that I tend to use because I'm looking at teams both as an organism, a social organism, but then also I tend to try and understand, like I said before, the individual and how through working with teams develops, which is different from looking at just how a team works or how a team or best practices for teams.
Right.
So in my own work, I'm trying to figure out if, for instance, what does Amanda need to be motivated about to enter into a team project? And does the leader understand Amanda's motivation? So, for instance, if she wants to get a paper out of a collaboration, as a leader, understanding that is going to make Amanda's contribution much more high performing. But if someone comes along and says, I want to join your team, and you find that they're, I don't know, they're interested in a data set or utilizing a machine, an instrument or something like that, and you never allow them to fulfill that need that from that motivation, I think a leader's out of touch with the human development that goes along with being part of a team and of course the career development.
That's great. Thank you, Guy. So I do want to head over to Easy Retro in just 1 minute. Before we get to that portion, there's one more question I would love for Lakaya to respond to, and I'm going to go ahead and drop this in the chat right now. Let's see, here we are. The question is, Lakaya, how do you change the mentality of competition to a mentality of collaboration in an environment that promotes individual success? I mean, not that anyone working in academia struggles with that, but I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yes, thank you so much for asking this question. It was one of my favorite ones because I think that we fail to recognize that competition is a type of collaboration. And it requires the other people that you are competing with to be your collaborators. Like it's a maladaptive form of collaboration in the face of the challenges that we see with respect to the changing landscape of how science is funded. And so that is my biggest takeaway, or the thing I would love for people to understand is that if you are operating from this mindset of competition, you are already a collaborator. You are very well aware of, the resources, or I don't know. It's really an opportunity, I would say, to look inward, to reevaluate what your goals are individually as a member of a team. And so this isn't necessarily thinking about the perspective of the leader of the team or the principal investigator, but especially as you even think about trainees and the competition for these scarce resources. And a reorientation or a reframe is that we are not competing for limited resources. We're really collaborating to determine how we can best steward these limited resources. And I think that collaborating intentionally, collaborating with, communication is really a great way to reframe our approach to this nefarious, very well-known challenge within academic environments.
Okay, so now I'm seeing your cape. I'm seeing your superhero power of positivity shine through in that response. So we get it. Thank you. Anything to add, Haley or Guy? before we move on. Super. All right, so we're going to get started with our crowdsourcing portion of the Q&A period. So essentially, we're going to show our Easy Retro board on the screen in just a moment, and you will be clicking on the plus sign at the top of the relevant column. Just type in your question or your idea, and when you're finished, you're going to hit the blue box within the same field. I'm going to add these instructions to the Zoom chat so you guys, our audience and our members at audience members at home have a chance to see these instructions on the screen while we're looking at the Easy Retro. But panelists, we'll just be kind of moving through the board, and if you see something that you would like to respond to, please go ahead and just read the question out loud, and then after we have a response, we'll be moving the answered questions into the column on the right. But folks who are interested, I'm going to provide the instructions in our Zoom chat here, so you have those handy.
Do you want us to just jump in if we see one?
Sure. That's
Okay.
great.
I'd like to speak to the one in team science practice at the top. What are the opportunities and challenges of incorporating AI in team science? I'm not sure where everyone in this room stands about AI and if it's your friend or your foe. Um, I think it would depend on what you do primarily in your work. However, I have a very close colleague who has been into machine-human interactions for a lot of his career. And now, of course, this is a golden period of time for him and his work. Um, I think we sometimes think that things like note takers, in Zoom meetings, Otter AI and Read AI and all those other things, are what we mean by teaming with and other types of tools, teaming with either generative AI or AI in general in scientific work. What my friend, his name is Ryan Watkins, if you want to look him up, takes a look at this with a little bit different of a perspective and looks at it more humanistically and asks ourselves the question, as we become more and more engaged with artificial intelligence, what does this say about human agency and how we, in the future, as this, this isn't going away, it's getting stronger and stronger and better. The tools are getting better and better. What is the human factor in teaming? And that's the question I would ask. I don't have an answer exactly, but there are still things and will always be things that are unique to the human creative mind and the affective nature of humans and their need to be connected. I think the question is going to be, is AI going to advance that ability to advance human agency, or is it going to stifle it? I don't think I have an answer to that, but I do think it's something that team science scholars should be thinking about. And again, this goes down not to just the tasks of doing team science, but the teamwork aspect of interfacing with artificial intelligence. I hope that gave somewhat of an answer for whoever asked it.
It was great. And, we do have a really great recording from our, our ACT webinar from, I believe it was September. Let me see if I can find this link right now. I would love to share this with you guys, but we had a really engaging presentation from Dr. Jim Sporer about essentially the role of AI as a team member in scientific research. And we can drop that link to that conversation in chat in just a minute. But I really do appreciate your response on that, Guy. And I agree, it's definitely something that we, regardless of your stance, your fears, your concerns, it's not anything we can ignore anymore. So appreciate that. Let's see. Haley, do you have a question on here that is calling your name?
Yeah, I like the second one in purple. So if you're experiencing it, let's see, so if there might be examples around how to break subtle disciplinary boundaries or biases and resolve conflicts, please share. So the way that team science works the best is you have two people across the island or more in different disciplines that are willing and curious and want to figure out how to bridge that divide in order to develop new science or technology, et cetera, for whatever the goal is. And I really think if you're questioning that like a lot, you may not be with the right person. I mean, maybe that's the wrong thing to say, but I think like identifying who you're going to collaborate with is chiefly important to achieving success in whatever your goals are. And if there are biases in terms of, well, like I'm a cancer biologist, I don't like virology, like that, there will be a virologist and a cancer biologist that would be wanting to work together. For example, my best friend's a virologist, but anyway, all that to say is, if you're at the point where like, well, I can't even talk to this person because of biases, like maybe go back to the drawing board. That's it.
I mean, mic drop. Yeah, I agree. You need to be able to have those conversations with differing opinions. Lakaya, anything to add there?
Yes, I think it's a great segue to Haley's response. And it's the question about reevaluating when a team really can't center around a common purpose, enforcing it, creating more harm than good. What might be an appropriate course of action if this occurs on a currently funded team with team science expectations? So versus simply not just submitting new proposals as a group. And this is honestly where team science being an interdisciplinary field really comes in handy, because there have been so many disciplines that have studied the concept or the practice of de-implementation, which is one of my favorite areas to study in implementation science. But you also see this explored in the concept of sunsetting different research centers, discontinuing product development. We see this in a lot of different phases or at a lot of different settings, but we don't necessarily explore it intentionally within team science or within academic research environments. And so I think that my response to that is to think really intentionally about what the intentional de-implementation of these practices that you are either experiencing as harmful or that you see as having the potential to become harmful, either at the completion of the project, having really intentional conversations about needing to shift strategically where you are right now, reallocating resources, in a way that will ensure that, people still have the opportunity to feel safe in that environment is really important. But the most, I would say the biggest thing is that as we really do reevaluate the landscape in which we are producing scientific discovery or even seeding scientific discovery, depending on where we sit within our organizations, it's important to take a step back and really reevaluate whether or not the work that you are doing is actually going to get you to your ultimate goal. And so it is an opportunity to think strategically about seeding new opportunities for collaboration with investigators or with team members from different parts of your campus, different industries. We talk a lot about community-based participatory research. There's always an opportunity to learn more, to refine your practices, and that can also be an opportunity to identify new funding sources or just pursue new areas of research that are more may be interesting to you or are more in alignment with the work that you're interested in doing. And so I would say that this is an opportunity to really take a step back and think about the lived experience of all of the individuals that are contributing to your team. I'm going to explore the need to strategically de-implement any of the practices that you think might be contributing to the experience that you described, or just looking ahead at sunsetting the collaboration in a way that will allow you all to still maintain, collegiality. I'll say it that way.
Mhm. Do we have time?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm
Go ahead. I was hoping. Yep.
I'm sitting here and thinking no one's going to choose the miscellaneous, so I think I'll choose it. When I first read it, I had to think for a second, oh, this is about the big administration in the United States. I thought it was like, your organization's administration. So no matter where you fall on the spectrum of what you think is coming down the pike as we change our national administration and how it'll affect your science. And again, I'm going to make an assumption that most everyone here is involved in health and medicine in some way or policy, not all. But I think there are times when it's easier to work in teams, and there's times when it's harder to work in teams. And let me give you some examples. A university as an organization needs to come up for reasons, incentives as to why people should work in teams. That's a policy that is not just about funding, and it's about a lot of things. Do we value collaboration enough to change our own policies about how people can more freely collaborate? I think it's going to be interesting to see in the next year, I'm not going to say 4 years, how this administration is going to affect how scientists work in teams. However, to my point before, it's a time to be braver about what we do in our science.
Mm.
We may find there's less funding available, but that can't keep us from continuing to do what it is we do and to continue to make the connections that we are making. I think also strategically, we need to think about places where it's likely we are not going to see cuts and things like that. Like, for instance, Department of Defense, has a great, robust funding system. I would find it peculiar if the Department of Defense shrank. I think it's time for us who are involved in science and people who especially work in teams to just be braver and more courageous now. And I'd like to shift to climate change. The climate change scholarly community for years was, not taken very seriously, but they stuck at it. And now it's very hard to say, well, it doesn't matter what the science says or not. I'm the frog is feeling the water getting hot, and I think it's really because um, scientists have stuck to their guns, stuck to what we've been talking about all day, and it just might be a harder time requiring more courage and bravery as we move into the next administration of the United States.
I really appreciate that response. And I also think you started to touch on a little bit, and just in the interest of time, if anyone wants to, Guy, if you want to speak to this point, this team science practice question that was just added regarding international or sort of like cross, let's see,
Is it green or purple?
Thank you. I need to put my glasses on. The purple. We seem
Oh,
to only be talking about team science within single
oh, yeah,
institutions.
yeah,
So as we talk about being creative and being brave, a lot of that means, hey, it's time to really be very
yeah.
intentional about building new relationships and stewarding new relationships in
That
other
that
cultures.
Yeah, that is right. And that's a really good point. I was responding specifically to our American uh situation. Yeah, I mean, it may also be an opportunity to start to reach across the water or land and become involved with uh collaborators who are not living under the same sort of changes administratively. That's an opportunity.
Right.
That is not a constriction. That, the European style of research and funding is very different than the United States, across the EU especially. But that's not the only place where science is being done. It's being done all over the world. And this may be a time to enrich yourself by stepping out of your American, context,
Right.
and still remain both a successful scientist and also a strong collaborator. So there's an opportunity here as well.
You guys, I don't know what I'm going to do with all of these positive vibes. It's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for those of you who have stuck around. I know we are a little bit over time. Before we leave, thank you for joining us today, panelists. We really appreciate your wisdom and your experience and your honesty in your responses. Uh, Audience, thank you for being here. Thank you for your time and attention and your awesome questions today. Just so all of you know, we will be sending out a link to the webinar recording, so feel free to revisit that within the next few days when we send it. The ACTS webinar series will be taking a break in December, but we are looking forward to returning in January. And my colleague Jessica is going to share the link to join our mailing list in the Zoom chat now. So please do consider signing up so you can stay tuned to learn about our programming lineup for 2025. Um, and finally, we would love your feedback when we wrap up. If you could just take that quick survey and let us know what you liked and what we need to do better, we would very much appreciate that. But everyone, thanks so much for being here. Best of luck as you close out your semesters and 2024. Thanks, folks. Take care. Have a good one.